Welcome to Online Church today. We're so glad that you could join us. My name's Neil Suter and I'm one of the ministers here at St Faith's.
And my name's Rosemary and I'm the Women's Minister here at St Faith's. If you've joined us for the first time, we're going through a series at the moment called Big Questions. And we've asked our congregation and their friends and family for their big questions about Christianity. And we've nailed them down to 4 of the big ones. If you remember last week, our question was, why Christianity? Aren't all religions the same?
And this week, we're looking at a question regarding the Bible. The question is, can you prove the Bible is anything more than an outdated text? It's a great question. Many people have asked that question in the past, and many people ask that question today. And we have Dr. Mark Stevens from the Centre of Public Christianity with us, and he's going to be seeking to shed some light on that question.
If you've never been to church before, or it's been a really long time since you've come to church, we are so glad that you're here and you're in exactly the right place. We know that it can feel a bit daunting coming to church, but we're hoping that this online format, watching maybe through YouTube, is a little bit more comfortable for you, so you can get these questions answered. Feel free to ask any questions that you might have along the way, the person that's invited you to watch this with them, or you can send them in on the Connect form in the comments section of our website. You can ask anything. Any questions, okay? We love answering questions. And just before we meet our speaker, Mark Stevens, we're just going to have a quick look at a video that reminds us of what those big questions are that people are asking.
Well, Mark, welcome to St Faith's. It's great to have you here with us this weekend. Thanks for coming along to speak to us. But just as we start, it'd be great to learn a little bit more about you.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you're from? What do you get up to in your downtime?
Yeah, good questions. I'm from the Kingdom of Kellyville, out in the northwestern suburbs of Sydney.
Yep.
So a long way from Narrabeen. What do I get up to when I'm in my spare time? I love to bushwalk, and my son has gotten into bushwalking with me, so I love that. Don't get to do it as much as I would like to. I'm a cricketer, but not very good, and so that's what I like to do. And reading is my passion.
Nice. And tell us a little bit about how you became a Christian.
I became a Christian. I grew up in a Christian family, but it was never the faith that I owned. It was never something that I believed. It was something that my parents believed. And as I went into high school, I had some friends invite me to a youth group, and it was there that I started to learn what the details of the gospel were. But actually the turning point in my life was I kind of went off the rails in the middle of high school, got into some trouble, and I'd always thought I was a good kid, and then I got caught shoplifting. And at that point, my reputation was trashed for being a good kid, but that was actually the point at which Jesus' death on my behalf for my sins became real to me. So I became a Christian in year 9.
And you work for the Centre of Public Christianity. And can you tell us a little bit about who CPX is and what do they get up to?
CPX is a group of thinkers and content producers. We're predominantly a media company, which means we're trying to get stuff, whether it's newspaper articles or videos or interviews, out into the public square to try and help people understand the truth, the beauty and the goodness of the Christian faith. And the reason that we exist is because that's a really hard space, the public square. It's not a space that necessarily understands Christianity very well. And we want people to walk away from the material we produce going, I'd be interested in finding out more about that at a church. So we want to kind of lay a platform so that then churches can come in and do their job of evangelizing.
Oh, that sounds awesome, mate. Hey, we're looking forward to you speaking today on the topic of can you prove the Bible is anything more than an outdated text? And but before we get to that, we might just watch a video on our series that's coming up on Alpha, which is a course looking at the person of Jesus.
Every day we ask so many questions. What should I wear? What's the weather going to be like? How am I going to fit everything in? But then there are those bigger questions, like why am I here? Where am I heading? Is there more to life than this?
I had arrived at an answer to the most important issue that we humans ever deal with. Is there a God? And I had arrived there without ever really looking at the evidence. And I was supposed to be a scientist.
At 28, I had gotten many of the things that I thought I wanted. My girlfriend was on the cover of magazines, I had a Beamer, and I was so unhappy. It was a realization maybe that I would never find happiness where I was looking for it.
I think for so many years, I always just strived to be strong in myself. All I needed was me and my buddies and, we'd be like invincible. But the truth is, none of us are.
And I found purpose, I found meaning, I found hope. God took something so broken and made it a beautiful art piece.
Alpha is a place where you can be yourself. You can say what you think and challenge everything. No question is too complex or too simple. And what your point of view is as important as anyone else's.
We are going on a journey together, an adventure to explore the questions of life, faith, and meaning.
We're really excited to be running the Alpha course here at St Faith's, and it will kick off in a couple of weeks' time on Thursday, the 30th of July. Alpha is a course where it invites people from all different backgrounds to come together in a really comfortable setting to talk about and ask questions about faith, life and meaning and what all that means. We've got two options for you this time. You can either come and meet with us in person here down at church, or you can jump online via Zoom and be a part of our group that way. In whichever format you choose, we would love for you to be a part of this course with us. We would love for you to invite your friends to come along and to learn more about what Christianity might be about and to ask those big questions. So you can click on the Alpha link and join and let us know if you'd like to come along and be a part of that with us.
We're going to read the Bible now. Mark will be referring to this part of the Bible in his talk, so it'd be great if we could have it read to us before we come to that. It's from Luke chapter 1, verse 1 to 4. The words will come up on the screen. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught.
Well, I'm a person who's easily excited by very simple things in life. One of the things I absolutely love in life is those things that we call life hacks, those banner ads you sometimes see in Facebook or people link a website, 10 life hacks to make your life so much better. I absolutely love it. I remember the first time I found out that you can treat sunburn with aloe vera. And I think it was the next week that we took a cutting and we planted one in our garden. It was the best news ever. I remember the first time that I found out how to poach an egg. Achievement unlocked. A beautiful moment in my life. But I gotta tell you, the absolutely best life hack I've ever found out in my life was when I worked out how you can tell which side the fuel cap is in your car without getting out from your car. Because I'd had this experience over and over and over again, driving into a service station, driving in a rental, or borrowing someone else's car and ending up with the fuel cap on the wrong side. And that's a moment that tells a lot about people, about whether you'll actually bother to go to the correct Bowser or if you'll try and yank the cord all the way over the car and hope for the best that it will stretch. But it turns out the car actually tells you which side the fuel cap is on. There's a little arrow next to the fuel Bowser icon on your dashboard. And apparently it's not there as an aesthetic flourish from the good folks at Toyota. No, it's actually there to tell you where the fuel cap is. Nobody ever told me this in my ELS test. It was a moment that I wanted to rejoice. I love me a good life hack, because life hacks help you see the relevance of something that was previously irrelevant. Life hacks help you see the relevance of something that was previously irrelevant. That's what growing up is like. As a child, even as a teenager, you're surrounded by stuff. You're surrounded by all these details in life. And most things to you at first look irrelevant. So before I learnt to cook, I didn't know what a colander was. Some of you probably still don't know what a colander is, and that's okay. Mum will be around to pick up your washing real soon. But I didn't know what a colander was, then I was shown, now I use it once a week. As you grow up, you're surrounded by all these details where previously irrelevant things suddenly become relevant, and all I needed was eyes to see. I needed some guidance. I don't know about you, but there's two things that happen to me when something that used to be irrelevant becomes relevant. Two things come over me. First, I'm incredibly chuffed with myself. I feel like I've won some award, like I'm incredibly awesome because now I know how to poach an egg. But secondly, not only am I chuffed with myself, I want to tell everybody I meet. Like as soon as I learn a life hack, I can't stop talking about it. I go to work, the boss is there saying any extra meeting points for the agenda, and I'm kind of like, do you guys know which side your fuel cap is on in your car? Because I can show you. There's something joyous, there's something overflowing when something that you didn't see before suddenly becomes relevant. The strange becomes familiar. It can be quite wonderful. And nearly 30 years ago, that's what happened to me when it came to reading the Bible. Now, let me be upfront. The Bible has always been part of the background of my life. I grew up in a religious family. There were always Bibles on my bookshelf. But every time I'd start reading the Bible, I didn't get very far. 6 chapters in, and we're done. And then something happened. Some key questions got answered for me. Some key insights were given. My eyes and ears were opened. And all of a sudden, this book became a treasure. And for almost 30 years since, I've never stopped reading the Bible. Perhaps you're one of those people who can't quite see what all the fuss is about. You're aware of people like me who assiduously read the Bible, and you think about it and you go, meh. Why obsess over a 2,000-year-old book? I mean, I don't read other ancient documents for life advice. I don't pull Thucydides or Beowulf off the shelf and sit there and think, I'm going to find something here that's going to transform my world. So why start with this one? Why would I be persuaded that here is something that is relevant and trustworthy and even life-giving? I'd like to explore that topic with you today by having a look at 3 sub-questions beneath the one big question. And those 3 sub-questions for us today are these. Do you need to read the Bible literally? How can I test the Bible? And in the end, what kind of proof are we seeking? Because I feel like if we can answer those questions, it'll help us a long way down the road to seeing why the Bible might be relevant for us. So let's start with question 1. Because perhaps the most common question I ever get asked is, Mark, do you read the Bible literally? And I'm guessing when people are asking me that, they're probably asking, are you crazy? Are you a flat earther? Are you someone who is just an idiot? And my answer to that question, whenever I'm asked it, is it all depends on what you're asking, friend. It's a nice evasive answer, I know, but I'm actually not trying to be tricky, because here's what I mean. Sometimes when people ask me that question, the assumption behind the query seems to be, we all know the Bible is just a work of myth, or it's just a work of fiction, and then Christians have gone along and treated it as if it's fact. The essence of the question sometimes is, you've taken a fairy story and you've read it like it's a true story. Now, let me illustrate for you what that might look like. In the early part of the 20th century, there was a series of photos that turned up that purported to show a number of fairies playing in a garden with two young girls. These came to be called the Cottingley Fairies, and they were a total fake. They were basically cardboard cutouts out of a children's book using kind of antique 20th century photo technology, but people fell for it. Like even Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy who wrote the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, fell for this. He was duped. And that was terrible. That was to treat a fairy story, a fake, as if it was a true story. So let me agree with the premise of the question sometimes. To read a fairy story as fact would be the worst. So is that what is going on with the Bible? Maybe it's written by primitive people. Maybe the Bible is just a book of poetry and metaphor, and then we've mistaken it for being historical reportage. But here's the problem with that. Yes, the Bible is old, but it's not primitive in that derogatory sense that people talk, that these people couldn't somehow distinguish different styles of writing, because in point of fact, the Bible is actually a big book. It's really a library of 66 books. And some of them are history books, and some of them are poetry books, and some of them are law books, and some of them are books that include stories and parables. And the writers of the Bible knew the difference between these things. Indeed, they actually celebrated those differences, because part of the genius of the Bible is that it communicates truth to us in all the different ways that human beings always communicate truth to one another. We know intuitively that we talk differently to one another depending upon what truth needs to be said. We know intuitively that there's a difference between a doctor's report and the way two lovers speak to one another. Well, at least I hope you know that there's a difference between those two things, because if my wife says to me that her heart is broken, then I take her out for dinner. But if my doctor says to me, Mark, your heart is broken, I don't want him to take me out for dinner. I want him to call me an ambulance. Because both times we're speaking truth, we're both saying something that is real and accurate. It's just that heart means something different when it comes from your lover or your doctor. We do this kind of switching around every day of our life. We pay careful attention to who's talking and how they're talking, and that's how we interpret people right. And we do it every day. And that's how to interpret the Bible well. You need to actually give the Bible enough of your attention and enough of your focus to work out, what kind of language is this book? Is it metaphor this time? Is it a basic statement of fact? Or is it something else? And as an adult, you do it all the time. It just takes effort and a little bit of experience. I remember once having dinner with some of my family, and I said to my wife at the dinner table, I said, darling, I bumped into Matt at the shops today. And my eldest daughter, who was very young at the time, turned to me really concerned and said, did Matt get hurt when you hit him? And it was at that point I had to realise she didn't understand that bump is a metaphor. She obviously thought that when I went to shops, it was kind of like human pinball, and I was kind of like, I'm coming for you, Matt. I'm going to hit you. But that's actually not the case, because we know that bump can mean different things depending upon the context. The Bible is a book designed to be read by grown-ups. Yes, there are parts of its message that can be understood by children, for sure, but it's designed to be read by grown-ups. It doesn't require you to be a scholar or an academic, but the Bible assumes readers who will take the time and give some attention to figuring out what is being said. It's not impossible, but it just takes a little bit of skill, like the skills we have in all of our communication day to day. So when someone says to me, "Do you interpret the Bible literally, Mark?" my response is, I treat the history bits as history, I treat the poetry bits as poetry, I treat the parable bits as parables. Now, some parts of the Bible are written in very literal, straightforward language. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Other parts of the Bible are filled with metaphor. And I can get that. So when Jesus says, "I am the door," I don't think that Jesus is describing himself as a block of rectangular wood available at Bunnings. I kind of know that it's an image. Now, I grant you, people do sometimes argue about whether this or that part of the Bible is poetry or whether it's history or something else. There are sometimes debates. There are sometimes arguments. And we do that sometimes in our own conversations, don't we? Sometimes we're having a conversation with someone and we'll ask one another afterwards, were they joking when they said that? Did they mean that literally when they said that? We do that in our own conversations, and sometimes there are good debates over how to read a particular part of the Bible. But here is what you can't do. You can't try and make something metaphorical or literal just because you'd prefer it to be that way. It's fine to debate about what has been written, but it's never fine to impose your preferences upon the text, upon any text, but also the text of the Bible. So I'm not trying to read all of the Bible literally, because that would be to force the Bible to speak in just one way. And that's a problem. If you try and make the Bible speak only literally, it gets really weird. If you fail to realise there's some figurative parts, some figurative use of language in the Bible, then as Rebecca McLaughlin says, it's like taking a love poem to the grocery store and wondering why all the items aren't on the shelf. It just doesn't work that way. We don't need to read all of the Bible literally or all of the Bible metaphorically. Instead, we need to read the Bible honestly and seriously. And all of us are guilty of misunderstanding the Bible because we don't read carefully. Believers, non-believers, we all have this habit of dipping in, of skimming off the top, of misquoting. It's like when you have a conversation with someone while you're still trying to text on your phone. You'll notice that you frequently mishear people. If you don't give things your focus and your attention, you miss it. So if you're going to consider what the Bible has to say, you should give yourself enough time to read it properly, to read it fairly. It would be absolutely tragic for you to reject a message the Bible isn't saying. How many times in films do you see those moments where a character overhears a conversation and they overhear a wrong bit of the conversation and they draw the wrong conclusion? Happens all the time. And then later on there's this tearful confrontation scene and they said you never want to be around me, and they say, but I wasn't talking about you. We know what it's like to only hear half a conversation and to draw the wrong conclusion. It would be tragic for you to reject a message the Bible isn't saying. But you'll only ever know what the Bible's saying if you take the time to read the Bible honestly and seriously, and then to test out its claims. Which leads me to my second question, which is, how can I test the Bible? So I've just told you that the Bible has filled with lots of poetry and lots of metaphor at certain points. It is a book filled with beautiful language. It's totally influenced the English language. This is where we get phrases like the apple of my eye or by the skin of my teeth. Those come from the Bible, beautiful metaphors. But a lot of the Bible, is written as history. A lot of the Bible is about narrating events where God shows up, where God acts within our real life, And that's the point of the Bible, to say that if the history is true, if God has really acted within the world, then everything is different. If God is alive and active, then everything changes. And in no case is that more true than the story of Jesus, because Jesus is the center of the Christian faith. If you want to start with anything in the Bible, if you want to start reading somewhere, can I encourage you to start reading the Gospels? They are the best place to start. They are the biographies of Jesus' life. The Gospels say that Jesus is God becoming one of us, that this is God entering into our world to teach us, to heal us, and ultimately for the Son of God to give his life away in order that we might be forgiven. And the whole truth of the Gospels, the whole thing on which it hangs, is that this really happened. So here's where you can test the Bible. Here is where you should test the Bible. If Jesus didn't happen, then you can switch off and you can walk away. But if it did happen, here is the best news you could ever hear. The Bible even invites you to test it. You can see that in the reading that was done for us at the start of this talk. These are the opening verses of Luke, one of the biographies of Jesus. The opening verses of Luke say this: "Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught." Those words from Luke, if you read them carefully and honestly, they're not signaling to you that what you're about to encounter is fiction or parable or poem. They're saying, what I'm about to tell you, this happened. Which means you can test the Bible at this most crucial point. Christianity is all about Jesus. And you are welcome to ask as many questions as you like about the story of Jesus. See, one of the great virtues of the Christian faith is that it is vulnerable to being disproven. Now that might sound strange to you, but for me it's a surprising sign of how strong the Christian faith is, because the Bible is honest enough to admit you shouldn't believe this if it didn't happen. And as my friend John Dickson puts it, Christianity deliberately places its neck on the proverbial chopping block of public scrutiny and invites anyone who wishes to take a swing. Because for something to be worth my ultimate trust, for something to be worth my commitment, I need it to be testable at some point. You should test the Bible where it can be tested. This is what Luke wants you to do. He wants you to know the story of Jesus goes back to eyewitness testimony. He wants you to know that you can find certainty. He wants you to see that this all actually happened. Because for Luke and for the rest of the Bible, it's only good news if it's real. It's only good news if it's real. You're free to say that Luke is mistaken, but you can't say that he's trying to write fiction. So read Luke as a historian and see if his claims check out. Now, I'm not going to spend much time exploring all the various lines of evidence that could show you why the Gospels can be trusted as a historical source. You can get that in some excellent books that I would encourage you to have a look at. Books like Peter Williams' book, Can We Trust the Gospels? Or John Dickson's book, Is Jesus History? Or if you've got more time on your hands, you could read Craig Blomberg's book, Can We Still Believe the Bible? Or you could read Craig Keener's massive book, Christobiography. There's lots and lots of material out there, and I've deliberately chosen books for you that were written by scholars in their field, not evangelists, people who've studied ancient history and actually come to their conclusions. I want to tell you not to be afraid to examine the evidence. But the astute among you might ask, okay, but what about confirmation bias, Mark? For those of you who don't know what confirmation bias is this well-recognised phenomenon amongst human beings that we all have this tendency to only find the evidence that supports what we already believe and to avoid all the evidence that might challenge our existing position. This is why your Liberal Party voting friends only ever find articles critical of the Labor Party, because they're not looking for anything to challenge their point of view. It's why your friends who love Mac over Windows never find anything positive to say about Microsoft. They're not looking for that. They're only looking for evidence that supports what they already believe. And so confirmation bias is this tendency we all have that you only look for the evidence that confirms your point of view. And so people might well say, you're saying look at the evidence, Mark, but it's probably just going to be confirmation bias. You're just going to get people to sift it to reinforce your existing point of view. And to be a certain degree, I'd agree with you. I have met Christians who often do that. I know some Christians whose belief in God is a bit like wish fulfillment. They can't even imagine the idea that God might not be real, and so they refuse to even consider it. Yeah, I've met Christians like that. But I'll make this point. Confirmation bias isn't a Christian problem. It's a human problem. Christians do it. Muslims do it. Even hard-bitten atheists do it. The brilliant American philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote a book in the 1990s where he said this, "I want atheism to be true. It isn't just that I don't believe in God and naturally hope that I'm right in my belief, it's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that." See, confirmation bias isn't just a Christian problem, it's a human problem. No matter who you are, it's easy to avoid the hard stuff. We're all affected by confirmation bias, but we're not enslaved to confirmation bias. All throughout history, people have been able to counteract confirmation bias and actually learn a thing or two. Some of us have even changed our mind even when the truth was inconvenient. Because in the end, we all have to make a decision to live our life with intellectual courage and bravery. In the end, I have to make a decision that I don't want to bet my life on something that is a convenient fiction. So you need to be able to ask, you really do, you need to be able to ask, could I be wrong? Don't commit yourself to a belief where you can never ask, could I be wrong? Because it's when you genuinely ask the hard question and you put your beliefs to the test that you actually learn what is real and what is true and what is solid and what is reliable. I've tried to do this, however imperfectly, throughout my whole life. Throughout my whole life, even as a believer, I've tried to take university courses, read books, engage in conversations with people who can challenge my beliefs and ask the hard questions of my own faith. Because every believer should be prepared to ask, could I be wrong? But here's the deal. By the same token, every non-believer needs to be open. Could Jesus be true? Which leads me to my final question. In the end, what kind of proof are we seeking to see the Bible's relevance? What kind of proof are we seeking? I've just told you that much of the Bible is history, and where you can historically test the Bible, you really should test it. But let's be candid, you can't prove everything with history. You can't even prove everything with science. For example, how do I prove to you that I'm a good cook? There's some tests you can do. You can perform a few investigations before you take a risk on my roast lamb. You could check the ingredients. You could crack out a meat thermometer and see that if I've got it at the right oven temperature. You can verify the knobs on my oven to see that they're correctly registering the temperature. You can even check which chef I'm using for the recipe. You can satisfy your mind about all sorts of different questions about my cooking, and you should satisfy your mind. But in the end, after all those questions have been answered, you also have to open your mouth and taste it. And at that point, you'll know for sure whether I can cook or not. Similar kind of thing happens with relationships. How can you prove to yourself that the person you're dating really likes you and maybe even loves you? Now, you can do some investigations. You can ask them lots of questions. You can ask their friends lots of questions. Heck, maybe you could even hire a private investigator, but that's borderline stalking. You can satisfy your mind to a good level about your prospective partner. And you should get your questions answered. You should satisfy your mind. But in the end, you also have to open your heart and not just satisfy your mind. If you really want to know if someone likes you or loves you, then after you've satisfied your mind, you have to have an open heart. There's actually no other way to know. I think proving the Bible is about both satisfying your mind and having an open heart. Here's why. The central claim of the Bible is that there is a God who loves you and he wants to have a relationship with you. And all the history, all the poetry, all the commands are there to help you meet God. Not simply to know about him, but actually to know him. But I can't fully and finally prove that relationship to you just by showing you historical evidence. Now, as an academic, I'm very confident that there are answers to all your questions about the historicity of the Bible and is about the historical basis for the resurrection of Jesus. I'm confident I can give you good answers to that, but history alone can't prove to you that God loves you. History alone is not the same thing as experiencing God's forgiveness through reading his Bible. Because just like any other relationship, once I've satisfied the questions in my mind, the only way I'll know for sure is if I open my heart. And just like with my cooking, after I've got enough questions answered, I've got to take the risk. I've got to taste, and I've got to see if there's something real in the experience. And so my encouragement to you, to anyone really wanting to prove the Bible, is this: get your questions answered. Test the Bible where you can test it. And in particular, test those stories of Jesus in the Gospels and see if there are good reasons to believe. But here's what I also ask. Don't just ask questions of the Bible. Read the Bible for yourself. Give it some time. Give it your attention. Read it with a friend, that might be helpful. Open your mind and heart to the possibility that God is there and he wants us to know him. And that's the way to finally settle the issue, either for or against. Even if you are not the praying kind, there really is no harm in praying a prayer that says, God, if you're there, as I'm reading, I want you to show yourself to me. The worst that can happen is that nothing happens. But the best that happens is that you might find that you are encountering God. I know the people at St. Faith's want you to trust the Bible with both your mind and your heart. And they'd love to have conversations with you about that. And I wish you the very best on your journey. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you want to talk to us and that you have given us this book, which we might find strange to begin with, but you want to speak to us through it. And as you speak to us, you use all the full range of communication that we do, that you speak in history, in poetry, in parable, and even in all sorts of other ways that we've yet to encounter. We ask that you would open our heart to hear what you have to say to us, whether we're skeptical, whether we're doubting, or whether we are a firm believer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, thanks for coming along today, Mark. And thanks for the challenge of putting it out to us to go and investigate for ourselves. Maybe you would like to read the Bible. In the moment, we're going to meet Glenn, who read the Bible for himself and had a lot of questions about it. And we're going to hear a bit of his story.
Hi, my name's Glenn Welsh. I've lived in the Narrabeen area for well over 60 years, and I've attended St Faith's Church at Clark Street, Narrabeen, for 40 years. I was brought up in a nominal Catholic home, and I attended Catholic schools through primary, high school, and we went to church a bit, occasionally. And because of that background, I did really believe in God and Jesus, but in a very, very shallow sort of way. I had no real firm ideas about them. They really were only in the background of my life. In the early 1960s, I started surfing, which was a great love of my life. I'm still trying to do, badly. And I became very involved with the local North Narrabeen Board Riders Club. Another great interest for me was also from high school, Teachers College and University, I was really interested in history, both ancient and modern. I just loved studying the ancient sources, particularly like Roman and Greek writers. In 1974, December, I married my wife Sandy. And though we had really great friends and great times with our friends from the beach and went away on lots of great surfing trips, we started to think about our lifestyle and our future direction in life. And we'd often, even after being at great parties, ask, is this all there is to life? There must be more than this. Then my wife started to go to a Bible study, and she really changed for the better in a positive way. It intrigued me, but she never, ever really Bible bashed me. So I got very curious. And I decided to give up my Thursday nights at the Antler Hotel, now the Sands, with my mates, to go along and check out this Bible study thing. So I went along to Bible study, and I'll never forget it, Matthew's story of Jesus, the Gospel of Matthew. And after a few weeks, a real light went off in my head. I thought, this is like some of the ancient texts I've read. This is a true story. It's a story about a man, Jesus, and his words and his interactions with other people. But it's also set in the historical context of the Roman Empire, a section of history I knew really well. And I thought, this sounds like Livy or Plutarch or Tacitus. This is not a made-up story. This is real. This idea of historical correctness led me to a real crisis in my life. If Jesus was telling the truth, it was time for me to make a decision. I just couldn't keep going my own way. I decided that if he is who he says he is, the King, the Lord, then I've got to give up running my life and hand it over to him. I made this decision. My wife had already done this. And so now we're both in the same boat. We've both become believers and followers of Jesus. And since that time, for 45 years, I've still continued to investigate the reliability of the Bible. I've been looking at literary evidence, historical evidence, which I love, and archaeological evidence. And it always points to the truth of the Bible. And I've never wavered in that faith. And there's a really great story I've loved always in my Christian life. It's about a Scottish archaeologist called Sir William Ramsay, who was really interested in a New Testament book of the Bible called Acts. Now, Acts is the story of the spread of Christianity after Jesus dies and ascends to heaven. And it's a spread of Christianity from Jerusalem through Samaria into modern day Syria, then on into Turkey, across to Macedonia, Greece, and finally ending up with Paul in Rome. Sir William Ramsay was a real skeptic. He didn't really believe in the reliability of the Bible. So he thought his mission in life was to go to Greece and Turkey and check it out, to disprove this historical book of Acts. Unfortunately, he had to change his tune because all the evidence and all his investigations only proved that Acts was completely reliable. He not only became a Christian, he also became a famous New Testament scholar and wrote many books supporting the Bible as reliable. I was sold on the reliability of the Bible very early in my conversion. And I'm even more convinced now after studying its reliability for so long. God's word to me has been a sure rock, a great confidence in good times and in some very hard times my wife and I have faced. But knowing its reliability gives me confidence to face the future. I know that Jesus will always be with me, and I will always be with Jesus.
How good was Glenn's story, and being able to see someone that had those questions about the Bible's authenticity and looked at the answers and then found the answers and found Jesus. How exciting. In a couple of minutes' time, service is going to wrap up for today, but I wanted to invite you along to the question that we'll be looking at next week in our Big Questions series, and that question will be answered by one of our very own staff members, Mitch Everingham. Mitch is going to answer the question of how can God be loving when he allows suffering? This is a really important question for those who are investigating the Christian faith and also for those of us who've been Christians for a long time. It's a great question, and it will be great for you to tune in next week to see how Mitch answers that.
Again, if you'd like to connect with us, or if you've got any more questions that have come out of today's talk, then hit that connect form. We'd love to hear from you. Also too, our Alpha course is coming up soon. If you're keen to be involved with that, then click that link as well. We'd love to hear from you. And also too, over in our YouTube channel, there is a whole bunch of questions that didn't make it into this series. We're only answering the top 4 questions in this series, but there is a bunch more that didn't make it. And we're seeking to answer those questions in a format of about 4 to 5 minutes. So we'd love to see you there.
As we finish our time together today, we're going to sing a song together. So please join us if you'd like to sing with us. And we look forward to seeing you next week and jumping online to watch the next of our big questions. We'll see you then.
See you then.
Take care.